What do you think, dear viewers, can be found in the madman's home? What trophies do serial killers keep for themselves? Don't think too long. You won't be able to imagine such horror anyway. In this video, you'll learn how plumbing issues can help catch a serial killer. Why is it always important to know what you're eating? Do criminals learn from their own mistakes? Buckle up. Here we go. Dennis Nilsen and plumbing problems. The first anti-hero on our list, Denki. Endre Nilsen, known as Des. This man was the true embodiment of horror. He killed at least 12 people, although he himself would sometimes understate or exaggerate this number. The investigation managed to prove exactly 12 murders. Des had serious psychological problems. One of them was a complete uncertainty about his own sexuality. He knew he wasn't heterosexual, but he wavered between being gay and bisexual. To figure this out, he conducted a peculiar experiment with his own brother and sister. However, he didn't ask for their consent. He committed his first murder on New Year's Eve, December 31st, 1978. The victim was 14-year-old Stephen Holmes. The boy met Des at the Cricklewood Arms pub. After drinking together, Nilsen invited him to his home. Stephen agreed and never left there again. In the morning, when Des woke up, he saw that the boy was still sleeping, and suddenly he was overwhelmed by fear, the fear of separation. He didn't want Stephen to leave. The decision came instantly. Des took a tie and strangled his victim. But the most gruesome part began after the murder. Nilsen didn't dispose of the bodies immediately. He lived with them for a while, engaging in strange, morbid relationships. Only after some time did he dismember them and dispose of the remains. Over time, the number of victims grew. More and more young men disappeared without a trace. Who knows how many more Nilsen would have killed if it weren't for one seemingly trivial, everyday problem. On February 4th, 1980, Des contacted the management company with a complaint. He was having problems with the plumbing. He probably had no idea that the blockage was caused by the remains of his own victims. Plumber Michael Catron was sent to deal with the problem. What he discovered in the pipes left him in shock. In the plumbing, there were pieces of flesh and small bones. When Catron reported this to Nilsen, he just joked, saying someone was flushing Kentucky Fried Chicken down the toilet. But the plumber didn't believe him. The next day, he returned with his supervisor and conducted a more thorough inspection. What they found was impossible to ignore. A huge amount of bones and remains clearly came from the apartment on the top floor, where Des lived. The pathologist, he confirmed the terrible truth there. These were human bones. Moreover, among the remains, they found part of a neck with signs of strangulation. Soon, the police arrested Nilsen. He was sent behind bars for the rest of his life. Thus ended the story of one of the most gruesome serial killers in the United Kingdom. Dennis Nilsen died in 2018. Karl Denki, a criminal who escaped justice. Karl Denki was nicknamed the Forgotten Cannibal. He didn't get this nickname for nothing. He was not widely talked about because he lived in a time when the press was not so widespread, and there were not many literate people. But what the police discovered in his house made even the most hardened shudder. Experienced investigators, but let's take it step by step. Münsterberg, December 21st, 1924. 1924. Year. The police received a report that local businessman Karl Denki attacked a vagrant named Vincenzo Oliveira. According to the victim, it all started quite innocently. Denki offered him a small job to write a letter. Karl had poor eyesight, and he was willing to pay for the service. Vincenzo agreed. But as soon as he started writing, Denki grabbed an axe and tried to hack him to death. The vagrant, by some miracle, managed to escape. He ran to the police and told them everything that happened. However, the law enforcement officers treated his story with a fair amount of skepticism, but they still decided to investigate. Denki was arrested and sent to a holding cell. No one intended to keep him there long, just until the interrogation began. But the interrogation never took place. 30 minutes before midnight, Sergeant Pock discovered that Karl Denki was dead. He had hanged himself with a makeshift noose made from his own handkerchief. But the most terrifying discovery by the police came after his death. Denki's suicide seemed strange and unexpected. But something else turned out to be even stranger. A search of his house was conducted only 3 days later. And what they found they truly shocked the police. An entire arsenal of tools for butchering meat. At first glance, nothing unusual. Carl traded in pork and meat products. But what truly horrified the investigators was this: 420 human teeth, 480 bones, and remains prepared for consumption. Now there was no doubt left. Karl Denke was a true cannibal. To convey the full scale of the horror, allow me to quote the official forensic report on the Denke case. Those who are faint-hearted, please cover your ears. The first discoveries made in Denke's house during the search were bones and pieces of meat. The latter were in a saline solution, in a wooden barrel. There were a total of 15 body parts with remnants of skin, 2 parts of the chest, very hairy. The torso was cut in the middle, 3 fingers above the navel. In the piece of the front abdominal wall, the center of the navel is visible. The other parts belong to the sides and part of the back, the largest measuring about 40 by 20 centimeters. As a result, the investigation proved 30 murders committed by Karl. The information that emerged about the real activities of the deceased Karl Denke caused a wide resonance in society. Although no one knew for sure whether Denke sold human flesh at the market, the population immediately began to actively spread this version. These people can be understood. The news was so shocking. Anthony Sowell, twice on the same rake. Perhaps each of you has heard the proverb: a wise person learns from others' mistakes, while a fool learns from their own. The American killer Anthony Sowell should be classified in the third category, those who do not learn at all. His own. Anthony committed his first crime back in 1989, the year 1989. In that year, he attempted to rape a pregnant woman, after which he tried to strangle her. However, fortunately, the criminal's plan did not come to fruition, and the victim escaped, reporting everything to the police. Anthony was immediately arrested, and in 1990, he was sentenced to 15 years in prison. One would think that 15 years is more than enough time to reassess one's life goals. Not quite. After his release in 2005, Anthony spent a couple more years in dormancy. Anthony returned to crime in 2007 and continued his activities until he was caught by law enforcement in 2009. So, September 2009. A disturbing report is filed with the police. A woman named Latundra Billups claims that Anthony Sowell lured her into his home, gave her alcohol, and raped her. But it wasn't just about the rape. The police understood that this man had broken the law before. However, they had no idea how far his crimes had gone. On October 29, 2009, Sowell is arrested. 2 days later, the police obtain a warrant to search his house. And this is where the real nightmare begins. In the basement, there are 3 bodies, all women, all strangled. On the 3rd floor, there are 3 more corpses, wrapped in baby blankets. In the yard, there are 4 more bodies in various stages of decomposition. And in the shed, a human skeleton, a total of 11 victims. When talking about his crimes, Sowell admitted that he treated the murdered the same way he wanted to treat Latundra. He lured them into the house, plied them with alcohol, raped, strangled, and eventually dumped them in the basement. Later, Sowell tried to plead insanity. However, the court did not believe the arguments presented and sentenced the maniac to death. However, it was never carried out, as Anthony died in February 2021 due to a prolonged illness. Jeffrey Dahmer, a killer caught by chance. Jeffrey Dahmer is quite a notorious name, especially in the United States. This maniac is responsible for 17 brutally murdered people. The first murder by the maniac occurred back in 1978, and the last one in July 1991. For a whole 13 years, the criminal was at large, committing his atrocities. This is slightly longer than the period during which another infamous maniac, Andrei Chikatilo, was active. Dahmer's victims were men aged between 14 and 36 years old. Jeffrey could have been caught much earlier, but fate decreed otherwise. So, on May 27, 1991, in 1991, a concerned woman, Lauthunder Smith, a neighbor of Dahmer, called the police. She reported that a naked Asian boy was running down the street. He was clearly disoriented and frightened. The police arrived at the scene. They indeed found the teenager. He couldn't speak coherently and looked lost, and then Dahmer himself appeared. In a calm voice, he explained something like, "This is my 19-year-old lover. He's just not himself." And the officers believe him. Moreover, they even escort him and the boy back to the apartment and leave. As soon as the door closes behind them, Dahmer kills his 13th victim, 14-year-old Konorak Synthesophone. If the police had conducted even a cursory search, they would have found a body in the apartment. The 12th victim, Tony Hughes. But Dahmer was allowed to escape justice for a little while longer, and during that time, he killed 4 more. However, luck couldn't last forever. On July 22nd, 1990, in 1991, Dahmer attempted to murder Tracy Edwards. Dahmer, in his usual manner, tried to handcuff the victim. Tracy resisted and didn't let the maniac cuff his other hand. The victim ran out into the street. Handcuffs were dangling from Tracy's left hand. This is what caught the attention of nearby police officers. When the police finally broke into Dahmer's apartment, what they saw there was beyond comprehension. Throughout the apartment were gruesome discoveries. On the wall were photographs of dismembered bodies. In the refrigerator were 3 heads, a human heart, and entrails. In the bathroom, there was a pot with hands and male genitals. In the cabinets and drawers were skulls, hands, containers with alcohol, chloroform, and formalin, jars with male genitalia. And in the closet, a complete human skeleton, a scalp, and another pair of genitals. But the most terrifying thing was a 57-liter barrel of acid. Inside were 3 human torsos dissolving in chemicals. Dahmer's apartment was a true factory of death. The discovery was a shock not only to the police but to everyone who later learned about Jeffrey Dahmer's deeds. Ultimately, the maniac was sentenced to, believe it or not, 15 life imprisonments, which technically amounted to 957 years of incarceration. However, Jeffrey served only 2 of them. On November 28, 1994, Dahmer was beaten to death by another inmate. Kendall Francois. A very long search. Kendall Francois is the last serial killer I will talk about today. Overall, he is not much different from his predecessors who hid the bodies of their victims in their own homes. His peculiarity lies in the fact that it was in his house that the police had to conduct a search for several days. The working conditions were so challenging, but let's go in order. Kendall began his criminal activities in 1996. In that year, the maniac killed 3 prostitutes, with whom he was a regular client. By September 1998, the criminal had managed to kill at least 5 more women. September 1st, 1998. Kendall attempted murder. Kristen Sala. However, the girl managed to fend off the criminal. Moreover, Kristen persuades the criminal to take her back to the city. In the car, there is a tense silence. But when they pass a gas station, Kristen jumps out of the car and escapes. Witnesses immediately report to the police officers who arrived at the house. Kendall, with a search warrant on September 2nd, encountered a rather unusual problem. The house was drowning in trash. Clothes covered the floor in a solid layer. Food, decomposing and rotten, was lying everywhere. Newspapers, broken furniture, empty cans, bottles. In a word, chaos. And the smell. One of the detectives admitted. In his entire career, he had never seen anything like it. The stench seeped into every corner, every crevice, escaping outside like a poisonous fog. The police were sure that something terrible was hidden in this house. 3 days later, on September 5th, 1998, law enforcement found 8 bodies. 5 in the attic and another 3 were buried in the foundation of the house. For his crimes, Kendall Francois was sentenced to life imprisonment. The criminal died on September 11th, 2014, at the age of 43. The official cause of death was a disease related to AIDS. It's quite possible that this is true. The maniac's past connections came back to haunt him. Yeah, it's shocking what terrible acts a person is capable of. It becomes unsettling to realize that many serial killers are completely unremarkable people. However, there's nothing to fear, because you have knowledge. I hope that you, dear viewers, have become more informed on the topic explored. Speaking of informed people, friends, you have the opportunity to join our team. If you have video editing skills, can voice over videos in Russian, English, and other languages, or write interesting scripts, we would be happy to work with you. contact us through our Telegram bot. The link is in the description. Well, with that, I bid you farewell. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. See you soon.